to open the January 10th, 2023 Bethel Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. Thank you all for coming. The first thing we're going to do is resume the public hearing for 9 and 11 Diamond Avenue. And we continued that at our last meeting so that the members of the commission who were not able to make that last meeting would have an opportunity to pose their questions to the applicant this evening. When those questions have been finalized and responded to, I would ask that anybody who's here who has not previously had an opportunity to speak or submit written statements to the commission, take an opportunity to speak if they so wish. We have heard over 4 hours of testimony up to this point. So a repetition of what's previously been stated to the commission is necessary. So with that, I would open it to the commission who may have any questions for Mr. Marcus or his client. Penny, Bob, start with you guys.
Yeah, it's Penny. I just have a question. Or I just don't have just a question. What's the general layout of this? I know that right now we're just discussing the zoning change. I mean, and that's all that's really on the table, although we all know that, you know, this is preliminary to a larger concept plan. What is, for right now, or let's say into the future, what are the plans for the private homes that are already existing along Diamond Avenue? And I know that that's for future, but I would like to hear your thoughts because I think that impacts what I think about the Diamond Avenue proposal right now.
Is that it, Penny?
That's all I got.
Mr. Marcus, you want to?
Yeah, I'm going to try to respond again for the record. Neil Marcus, Commonwealth PC, on behalf of the applicant. So Penny's question is correct. We're talking a little bit about process and then long-term impact. So this is a zone change, as we say, as we know, to change the I zone into the TOD for purposes of a concept that we've explained to you, that you've seen. That's not necessarily what's going to get built there, because what's going to get built there is obviously what you approve. And if you feel that this concept's great, but we want to add commercial, take away residential, we want to deal with the height of bulk of the structures, those are all part of the site plan phase of the application. If the TOD zone is not granted, then we never get to that at all. So this is the first step, as Penny says, seems to be preliminary. It is. It's and again, just to put it in perspective, 5 years ago, so as a zoning lawyer, I would never have come to this commission on that property for this type of proposal, because quite honestly, there was the I zone and that location was still an I zone. The plan of conservation and development changed that in many respects, because the town of Bethel, and by the way, just as an aside, did anybody happen to read the Danbury paper yesterday? Because if you went to the second page of the Danbury paper, they talked about the legislative agenda is going to have two really hot issues, which you guys are as interested in as I am. One is they're going to talk about zoning generally, because remember, you guys have a lot of power locally, but you exist at the whim of the legislature. Yours exists by statute. So if they decide that the zoning commissions and not this commission, because quite honestly, if you read that article, what you've done is exactly what they're talking about doing in this article.
That's exactly right.
I said that last meeting without that article. I said, this commission, as much as I argue for more affordable housing, I have to commend you for what you've done. But the other issue, of course, is affordable housing. And that article yesterday, if you read it, all of you could sit and sort of gloat because you've done the right thing up to this point. So the TOD is exactly what the state is looking for. They're looking for housing opportunities, including affordable, that make sense for environmental purposes, like cutting down on greenhouse and gas emissions would be great. Using public transportation, that's all the future of the legislative policy. So, as I say, until TOD came into effect in the current plan of conservation development, we might not have ever thought of looking at this site for this type of development. But once the zoning enabling has occurred with the plan of conservation development, and back to Penny, the process is that the applicant comes to the commission with a concept and says, if you change the zone, I will develop this property in this manner. But you still reserve the right to ultimately determine exactly what that's going to look like. Because the TOD is in fact a zone that allows a tremendous amount of discretion on the part of the commission. It is it's a special permit type of use. Its special permits have been trimmed back by the court, particularly in the McLaughlin case, but the special permit, the TOD still has language which allows for phasing of development and multi-purpose uses of a property. And in that, Penny, to answer the second part of your question is, well, what happens to the neighborhood? We don't change the rest of the neighborhood. The rest of the neighborhood is in fact an existing and somewhat unique residential zone. It is single family homes in downtown Bethel. And there are a number of those neighborhoods, but they're changing. A lot of them are going multifamily as time goes on. But and I'm thinking of South Street in particular. I mean, South Street's perfect. You got a lot of single family homes there, but as time goes on, it's changing to multifamily. That could happen here, but nobody's going to force the single family use out. That'll happen when people decide that the neighborhood has changed to something that's projected in the TOD. It's become more of an urban, slightly less suburban area. And again, in viewing this application, the question is, are we looking forward or are we looking backwards? If we're looking backwards, then nothing changes. But the plan of conservation development is so forward-looking, it really is. And this whole idea of the TOD zone is very progressive. This plan is just a part of it. But the single-family homes will remain. And my guesstimate is, from looking at what's happened in Bethel over the last 20 or 30 years or 40 years that I've been doing land use here, I would say that in 10 years, some of those single family homes will have changed. And they'll become, either people will consolidate sites because they're small lots and build some mixed use, more similar to what's being proposed in this application. But that's going to be a gradual change. And it's going to be determined by the people who live there themselves. I don't foresee that a developer is going to come in and assemble the entire neighborhood of single family homes at one time. I think it'll be small, and it'll be more like South Street, where you've got some of the old houses, and maybe the two house lots will be combined, and those houses will either be converted or will be, in some cases, knocked down and rebuilt. So will it impact the private homes? The answer is yes. Will it happen tomorrow? Probably not, over a period of time. But at the same time, without the TOD, the question is, what happens to this industrially zoned property over the next 10 years? And quite honestly, I'm strong. There is nobody that you'll find in front of this commission that's more of a proponent for industrial-based Connecticut. I mean, that's what I was brought up in. I grew up in an industrially based business that barely exists at all in New England anymore. And I would do anything to try to foster that type of land use. But guess what? It's not around. We don't see it. You don't see a lot. And then when you see, Danbury is a great example where you have industrially zoned property next to residential property that's almost approved for the Clancy Brothers warehouse operation. It gets a lot of opposition because in reality, there's people have a hesitation to want industrially used property. So I foresee the neighbors who came out and talked about the Kellogg's being great neighbors. They are great neighbors. And I said the same thing. They've kept that site in pristine condition. They don't adversely affect anybody. But guess what? They're not going to be there in 10 years. And in 10 years, what type of industrial use do you foresee in downtown Bethel? And I don't foresee anything other than, quite honestly, contractors. Contractors are always looking for a yard. You can't find industrially zoned property in the Danbury area that's readily available for anything that the contractors need. So you get contractors' yards. Are the neighbors going to be happy with a contractor's yard there? I don't think so. And the person that comes in for that application is going to probably get more opposition than we have this evening and the prior hearings on this application. But so it's a question of having vision. And that's what we're at. You guys have the vision. We're just saying, here's a way to accomplish it. And the ultimate plan, this is preliminary. The final plan is going to take a lot of review, design review, and impact considerations to get built. And when I say that, the TOD really is a teamwork. It is, because if the applicant is coming here and fighting with the commission over the plan, it's not going to work because it's a huge investment. You guys saw what we're talking about here. And I told Adriano, he said, are you worried about the commission's decision? I said, I'm always worried about a commission decision. But quite honestly, I'm more worried about the ability to create the project that we want to create, that he wants to create. We as a team want to create, because right now, a lot of things are turning around in the economy. The cost of construction is still high. The cost of interest is skyrocketed. And the overall need for the mixed use, the retail space is questionable. I mean, you've got to take risks and have the willingness to do that. But you never get anywhere if we don't get through this preliminary stage. Without a zone change, it's been just a nice 4-hour visit with you. Maybe it'll be 5 by the time I'm finished. But that's hopefully that answers your question, Penny. It will have an impact on those homes. I don't think it's going to be negative. I think ultimately that the neighborhood will change in its ordinary course, like other neighborhoods have in downtown Bethel. And quite honestly, as I look around, I can't look at a neighborhood, and I've been involved in a couple of controversial applications. I think of my good friend Tim on Good Hill. You know, I drive in there and it wasn't me. I took my wife up there as we were driving to Bethel one day. She wants to know what I do all night with you guys. And I said, here's a project that was very controversial. And she said, you're kidding me. I mean, I said, why? I said, this is great. And she said, it's isolated. He said, what's the dispute? I said, well, it was going to be a lot bigger and it came out somewhat smaller. But at the end of the day, it was a cooperative effort in spite of some of the wrinkles that some of the waves that we had to get over. But here, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. And by the way, you and I'm going to give you a lot of credit for that too, on that particular one. And we did. We overcame a lot of issues. It's the same thing here. You're not going to have the issues. Personalities are a lot different. But the plan that you saw and that I saw, I think it's fabulous. If we get something close to that, I think it's terrific. But it will take the review of this commission, your consultants, in the applicant's patience and the applicant's perseverance to come up with what the final proposal will be. We're just at the starting gate, and that's where we are.
Great. Thank you, Neil.
I go along with a lot of what you're saying, Neil. For instance, when Kellogg came in, everybody hated it.
Yeah.
But once again, the commission and the people and the applicants all work together. And I think that's what this needs. When I look at the application you presented, 200 apartments, 4-story buildings, another downtown to compete with the downtown we already have. I don't really see it. But when I think of TOD and all the work we put through, that something could be made out of this.
Yeah.
That could be really, really nice for the people.
Yeah.
On the other side as well. But it's going to mean working together. In a cooperative stance here for this to happen. And for a lot of work to be done.
Yeah, hearing the story about the Kellogg,
Yes.
the Kellogg self-storage plan when it came before you,
Right.
reminds me of the late Lila Shaker in Danbury, who came out and led the neighborhood in opposition to my client's plan to build a Dunkin' Donuts
Oh, right.
on Osborne Street, on a construction yard filled with old dump trucks and broken down equipment. And when we finally got it approved, about 8 months later, there was a letter to the editor from Lila Shaker complimenting Eddie Batista for the beautiful job he did in cleaning up the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And admitting that she had been a staunch adversary.
Yeah.
But
I mean, part of what
Yeah,
I've seen,
I agree.
I think it's very nice. I like your,
Yep.
I come from Yonkers, New York, okay? And so the walk-ups, the apartments, like in Brooklyn, that's a beautiful concept.
Yeah.
And I think some of that would really be terrific. The 3- and 4-story apartment buildings, no, I don't. I don't think they belong there. And I just don't. But we have to look at this as a whole. And a work in progress.
Penny, was there anything else?
Bob and Rich.
Bob and Rich Tibbetts.
Bob, did you have any questions?
Thanks, I'm good.
I'm sorry.
Is Bob, are you on?
Bob, are you?
Yeah, I thought, was Penny going to say something else or?
Oh,
She's
no,
not.
He's finished.
Neil makes a good point here about how we have done well to plan ahead here on some of the stuff that now the state is trying to put into play themselves.
Yeah.
And in addition to what he has to say, that's how we wound up with a siting council that tells us where all the cell towers are going to go, because they couldn't get anything through planning and zoning and any place in the state, so they took it away from us.
Yeah.
This is why they have tried to take away affordable housing, and we've tried to plan affordable housing within our own town the way we want it done. So, that's what we have to look at here is what are we doing for the future? What are we doing to plan for the future? And that property across the street. And that's what we have to do here as a planning commission. We have to be ahead of the curve. And I think we have been ahead of the curve on some of these issues. And we have to continue to be ahead of the curve, or at least be aware of what we want to do as a town. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Rich, did you have any questions?
Nothing additional. Thanks, guys.
Mr. Parsons?
It just seems to me that this is there could be some work here to make something work, but the issue I see here is creep. We turn this zone over, and the creep will go to the next property, and then the next property, and then the next property, and then all of a sudden we have Bethel 2.0 or Danbury 2.3, and that's kind of what I'm saying.
Mr. Shanley?
I want to start that I missed the public meetings, but I did watch all the recordings. I will read most of the emails. I'm not gonna say I read all of them. I just got them in print today. But I did read as many as I could from my phone earlier today. My questions, acres buildable. And it's how many acres is it total? Remind me?
Well,
12. And how many are buildable and versus how many are wet?
I believe 2 are wet and 10 are buildable.
Now, if this,
Roughly, that's correct, yes.
okay, so would that change if it was kept? If it was kept industrial, right?
I'm sorry I'm answering, but I'm
That's good.
answering
You got
for
it.
that.
If you were here proposing a warehouse, would that change? Would it still
No.
be 10 acres or buildable and 10 or wet? 'Cause I know
Correct.
in the preliminary proposed site plan, there's some of it is gonna be kept open, as open space.
A fair amount, yes.
How many acres is that?
Approximately. There are 3 parks. The wetland area is approximately 3.5 acres that would be kept open. When you encompass the 2 other green spaces, it's approximately 5 acres
Just
So 5 of the 12, you're gonna keep open.
correct.
as identified. green space.
In,
Yeah.
again, with the preliminary plan.
Right.
Yeah, by the way, there's open and green space are slightly different.
Right.
I mean, because there's green space.
There's no blacktop, and there's no building. right?
Yeah, but there's green
That's
space
how
that
I'm
are,
considering it.
have benches and walkways and
Of
stuff like
course,
that.
of course. I know a lot of concern was put in on the traffic, and we might be getting ahead of ourselves on that. I appreciate your traffic engineer last meeting was blunt and just said it's gonna create traffic, which I agree. One thing he said, though, that I don't agree with is saying a lot of the traffic studies are spot on. I mean, I don't think so. I mean,
You're not a traffic engineer, of course.
no, but I work for a contractor that does a lot of state traffic work, and I've seen firsthand the what these traffic engineers do and some of the silly things that they come up with.
I've never written a memo that's not correct.
Well, I'm just stating, so I take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
And I think that was just said. I like to err on the side of caution when I think, if somebody tells me 100, I'm thinking 120.
But
So
you understand that the traffic issue is phase 2 in reality.
I do. But like you said 2 minutes ago, we need to think forward.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking forward, because if this gets approved, then we're on to phase 2. So I need to keep that in the back of my mind while considering
Correct.
the zoning change. I haven't, I just think there's a lot of other things, both sides, industrial wise and keeping, if it was to go residential. I mean, even with again, it might be getting ahead, but the proposed, you're gonna have delivery trucks with restaurants and some mixed use in there. So I feel like that might be a wash as far as, having diesel trucks coming in with industrial. And we can't forget that there is a train or a rails right there. So if someone was to come in industrial wise and build something back there, they could always tap off the rails, and you'd have no traffic coming in. It would all come in on train. Rings End does it. The old Superior Rail down in Danbury has it. They're off that main line. And those freight trains come in at night. So again, I'm not stating one way or the other. Then people might be here complaining about freight trains coming in the middle of the night, but again, it's another option to think about. That you have someone come in there, like this Superior Rail type person that works on nothing but rail cars, you have no traffic, everything comes in on the rails. So it's something to think about while we're considering getting rid of this industrial space, because while I don't think it's in a great spot and you're not going to attract an Amazon warehouse, you could attract something like that needs to be close to have an industrial space right on the rails. So again, just all stuff that I'm considering, but I appreciate the application and the answers to my questions and the history lesson you gave earlier. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Curtis.
Yeah, I'm kind of going off of Paul's train of thought. It's like, It would be great to have more industrial manufacturing, tech businesses, but can we really do that in that space? And I can't help but wonder if it was the opposite way around, if that was all residential right now, and somebody came in with an application to make it industrial, would there be more of an uproar, or would it be, oh, okay, you know, that sounds like a good idea? So I'd like to find some, you know, really good, you know, happy medium here. The application isn't bad. I'm kind of at a loss right now, so I'm sorry.
I will tell you that from my experience, if that were a residential property and I wanted to have it changed to industrial, I'd get run out of town on one of his rails. In reality, no, I mean, I can't imagine that I could even figure out a reason that we would ask if that property. A rail siding would be the only thing that might influence anybody, but leaving that aside, I can't think of any argument to this commission or any commission like it that would say this residentially zoned property in downtown with the road network that we have should be industrial. It would be an anomaly to make that. On the other hand, the happy medium, I mean, in reality, that's what your TOD zone is. It's something that allows different land uses. It doesn't have to be all residential. It could be some commercial, it could be some office, and in different mixes of residential. In an area that is compatible. Somebody said we're trying to build a second downtown. We're not. First of all, the site's not really large enough, but we're trying to build something that is absolutely compatible with what is right here in the center of Greenwood Avenue. I mean, there's so I agree with you. I mean, in theory, whenever you're doing development that changes the zone from industrial or commercial to residential or vice versa, any change, what you want to do is to do it because you're striking you're creating the transition. In transition zones, we argue a lot, and that in reality, to the extent that you've got an established residential neighborhood of single family homes, this TOD zone is more transitional than an industrial zone. Is to say, here I've stuck with the worst of all possible worlds, and that's Mr. Keller. He's done such a great job and on that site, and he's such a good neighbor that I'm stuck with a guy who's unique in industrial uses. Most industrial zones that are right in adjoining in residential don't have that type of rapport with the neighborhood. So it's unique. And as I say, if he's there forever, that's one thing. But he's made it pretty clear that he'd like to retire. I mean, that's why he's selling his property. So you got to look forward and not look at the status quo. And I agree that you can achieve, and you'll have to rely on Beth as you go through this thought, as you go through your deliberation process, as to how this commission can use its discretion reasonably, its reasonable discretion in developing this TOD. Because quite honestly, if we can't get a site plan approved that meets the commission's desires, then, as I say, it's been a wonderful exercise. But we'll never get there if we don't get out of the starting gate. But I agree, I don't disagree with. But by the way, interestingly enough, so far I haven't disagreed with any of the comments except for on the issue of creep, which I didn't. That's always a problem. You know, it's always where do you draw the zone line? And it's always a problem. I don't have an answer to that other than to say that what you're doing tonight, and we've done for the last 2 months in this process, is to deal with that issue. Is to ultimately say There's a good reason to change the zone here, but that doesn't mean that that property over there we haven't even seen should be in the same zone later on. You don't know, but if you, again, if you're gonna talk about compatibility, that little I zone is way out of place. And
Possible.
so, but it's a good point. I don't
It's
have a,
unique,
yeah.
and unique could make it special.
yeah,
the right person.
yeah, for the right person.
And for the record, the applicant said it was gonna be the new downtown on this,
Thank you, Paul.
yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
on July 19th. Just wanna make sure we're all on the same page.
We're not rebuilding that.
No, it's gonna be a new one.
That's 6 acres. Anyways.
I have a question for staff as a point of clarity. It's my understanding, maybe wrong, that if this property zone change is not approved, the current owner can sell that property for any industrial use they choose, and they don't have to come before the commission. So a garbage company could move into that lot and have their garbage trucks and dumpsters sitting on that property. And it would be totally up to the owner of the property to put their own business in there. Is that a true statement, Beth?
Well, that's already happened with the property next door.
Yeah.
A garbage guy went in there with dumpsters full of garbage, and we had to work with Steve to get it removed. But in response to that question, somebody can come in if Mr. Kellogg chose to leave tomorrow. Okay, now, most of the neighbors are familiar with the system and how this works after attending meetings. The use could change without having to come into the Planning and Zoning Commission for notification, site plan, or anything like that, as long as it's all within the existing building. That use could be warehousing. That use could be FedEx coming in, or something of that nature. It's a use. The only time that they would come back to the Planning and Zoning Commission would be if there was a site plan involved. If they wanted to make the building bigger or put up more buildings on the property and things like that. Use is just governed by the regulations and strictly by the department. Unless it's not an allowed use.
Thank you.
I don't have any questions. Excuse me, as it relates to a zone change. I'll save any comments for, we'll go around the process.
Ms. Grant?
I think I'm done for today.
There's just some.
I have another comment.
Sure, Bob.
I also listened to both the tapes of the meetings that I missed and read all of the emails that have been presented to me. So I'm up to speed on this thing. And I think we just have to look at this as a process that we have to go through
Mhm.
to bring that up to a better use of that property than it's being used right now on that side of the street. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Beth, you had a comment?
There's some clarification that I want to provide the commission as far as helping you make your determination before the close of the public hearing. But before I do that, just a technical matter. You did receive a email in regards to this, and it's from Kathy Schaefer from 53 Hidden Brook Trail. And so I just want to note that for the record, and you can have a copy and pass that down. In regards to the zone change that you're working with tonight, it is the zone change from the TOD. You're going to the TOD from the industrial zone. Now, there are two distinct industrial zones within the town of Bethel. One is a pure industrial zone, which is mostly located within the downtown area. But I think that the commission should be reminded that we have an industrial park zone. The industrial park zone consists of hundreds of acres. Bethel is one of the most unique towns in what they have two industrial parks. They have Berkshire Industrial Park up in the Stony Hill area, and you also have the Francis J. Park, which is just expanding 4 lots. There has been a lot of discussion in regards to biotech and manufacturing and things of that nature. I would tell you that both of those industrial parks do carry a large manufacturing component, technical component, I am not familiar with biotech as far as what what components like that exist there. In regards to the industrial zone in the downtown area and the economy, I would advise the commission and also the general public that the Economic Development Commission issues a monthly, the Economic Development Director for the town of Bethel issues a monthly report dealing with business development and support. It deals with commercial real estate, the percentages associated with that, and the uses that have been going on within the town of Bethel. And just for your records and for your general information, I want to make sure that you receive at least the latest copy, which was attached to their minutes from November of 2022. Also, in regards to what you are talking about as far as a zone change from the industrial to the TOD overlay zone. Within the TOD zone, you have 3 industrial areas. You have Diamond Avenue, which consists of about 18-20 acres. In Diamond Avenue, these are your industrial uses that exist today. Outside of, again, I refer you to your regulations to look at the differences between industrial park and industrial zone. In Diamond Avenue, you have a molding company, a self-storage facility, a wood floor sales manufacturer, masonry, building, electric, 2 or 3 landscapers, and a storage of construction equipment going on Diamond Avenue on these properties. On Durant Avenue, you have a manufacturing facility, you have a warehouse, a bus storage facility, you have concrete pumping company and a self-storage facility. On Paul Street, you have a gravel stone retail area, you have a tractor trailer storage facility, you have warehousing and heavy equipment storage and material screening going on. All of these uses, for the majority of the years, have existed for over 20 to 30 years. And it's interesting because you mentioned Al Kellogg. Out of all of these properties that I've just recited to you, Mr. Kellogg and Performance Concrete, which is a concrete pumping company, are the only properties that have made any effort to make any type of improvement to those properties. All those other properties have existed the way they have been for the last 30 to 40 years. And I'm embarrassed to say in some instances, because of my own personal knowledge, 60 years. In regards to that, when you developed your TOD plan, that was based on a very short synopsis, what I have just presented to you. You looked at the property, you looked at your downtown area, and your study focused on how can we make it better? How can we bring back what we had before, but use our vision to make it better? I agree with you, the applicant did misstate, we're gonna make a new downtown. But I think I'm also gonna refer you to my existing report, which discussed the transition that has already occurred within the town of Bethel over the last 30 to 40 years. I'll just reiterate it a few more points at this time. It started with Dolan, used to have the storage, the gravel, the gas station. That was eliminated. You went to the Dolan Plaza. You went from the hobo fields behind Dolan Plaza to the Grand One. You went from the oil tanks, and probably there was a Sperry's rail that went over there for oil deliveries. I'm too old, I'm too young to know whether or not that happened. But again, the oil tanks were removed and that was developed as the Grand. Now, density, traffic, things of that nature is another phase. But as far as taking what you have and looking at the possibilities of making improvements, that is very important for you to look at as a zoning commission and as the zone itself. It is getting more difficult in dealing with these heavy industrial zones to sit there as a planner when someone comes in and they have a construction company, or they have, they deal in dump trucks and heavy equipment and whatever you want to call, to sit there and discourage them from those type of facilities. At the same time, one last comment I did want to make is in regards to real estate. I am not a real estate agent, but I believe that there was a letter submitted, something about real estate in these particular areas. I would just note for the record that 5 Durant Avenue, which consists of the buses for Easton. It's very interesting when you start researching these facilities. So we have the Easton buses parked over on Durant Avenue, and on Henry Street, we have our buses in an industrial zone. I'm not even getting into the other side of town where there's Vanderbilt Chemical, Shepherd's Warehouse, and all the other industrially zoned properties. I'm just dealing with TOD. But in the TOD zone, when you're dealing with where the buses are kept, for example, that property has been on the market for 5 years as a fully rented warehouse bus facility. When you talk about Diamond Avenue, 911, I believe it's 7, and I may be wrong. But it's where the line painting company is, and there's a bunch of landscapers. And again, that property has been available for sale for many, many years. Prior to that, also where Mars Electric has recently bought on the other side of that, I believe he's been there about 5 years, I'm not quite sure. That was on the market for at least, I believe, 10 years. And this is common knowledge, but for the most part, I just wanted to make sure that you have these comments in regards, and this isn't everybody in the industrial zone, but it is very important to understand the underlying zone and the TOD plan and that proposed zone in regards to what you're working with this evening. So I'll just pass out I'll just give you the one copy of the economic development method report.
We have.
it.
I have it down, and this is just the observations that you certainly could have made yourself. I just consolidated them in one format to make it easier for you, or I hope not make it easier for you, but to make it more difficult for you to come to a good conclusion as to what you as a board should render for this decision. And really, I think it's important to focus on the change, the proposed change. And I think that's all I have.
Thank you, Beth. So at this time, I will open it to the floor. I would ask that if you had an opportunity to speak at a prior meeting or you have submitted a position in writing to the commission, that you allow those who have not done either of those to speak. Remember, if you're going to speak, please stand, state your name and your address your questions to the commission, and when everyone has spoken, we'll ask the applicant to respond.
Can I just add one more thing to that, if you don't mind, sir? If you're going to speak, please come up front, because everything has to be put on recording. And when you stand back there, I've listening to some of the tape, I didn't hear because you were back there. So please come up front if you want to speak. Thank you. Sorry.
Is this good? Hi, I'm Colleen McCollum, 7 Farnham Hill, lived there most of my life. And I just would like to make a statement. And this came from the master plan report from July of 2016. This was the stakeholders interviews. One of the things the stakeholders said is it is the one place, downtown Bethel, that brings the community together, especially during special events. As it's been stated, this was presented as another downtown Bethel. The TOD plan must not dilute the viability of downtown. Concerns about the TOD plan having a negative effect on downtown were expressed numerous times and in a variety of ways across all stakeholder groups. Retail in the new development should not be drawn from existing downtown businesses, nor should the plan include incentives needed to revitalize and modernize existing downtown properties. This is from interviews with stakeholders. This is from people that live in this town and how they feel. And I honestly believe that needs to be taken into consideration, because we're being told that this is the TOD plan and we're all going to be listened to. Well, let's listen to what people said back in 2016. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Julie Sorchak, 8D Beach Street, Bethel. I've lived here for over 35 years. I just have a short little thing to say. Bethel is a small suburban town which has a lot of charm. Changes such as the zone change, to which I am opposed, will help turn Bethel into an urban city, which will completely take away the small town charm that attracted many of us longtime residents in the first place. The zone change makes way for large-scale developments which are not in keeping with Bethel's character. I would ask that the commission not make this zone change at this time, pending the upcoming working session on the TOD and pending the special election for first selectment next month, for which the TOD will almost certainly be an issue. Thank you. I thank the commission for your work.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
John Schmucker, 245 Greenwood Avenue in Bethel.
Mr. Schmucker, may I just ask if
Sure.
there's anybody else who wants to speak who hasn't previously? I think
Yeah.
this would be your third occasion to speak. Sure.
I guess I gotta speak.
Wait. Wait.
Wayne Ritter, 22 Elgin Avenue. Lived there for 49 years and this project is like, I would see the whole thing. It'd be like a little skyline. When I look out my front door, it would become like an urban city. When I saw the picture in the paper, it looked like a city of Norwalk. And that didn't represent Bethel to me. And with it being wetlands and you're saying you're gonna leave like 5-6 acres from wetlands, but you're gonna dig over there and you know it's still gonna be wet because the houses across the street are wet. Because they have sump pumps in their basements and everything. So it's not really, you're still gonna build, but it's wetlands. And everyone says you gotta save the wetlands and everything, but then here you go, you wanna build this big little city on the wetlands, and it's kind of wrong, you know? And I just think it's just too much. And if you lived in my neighborhood and you came, or somebody else came and wanted to build this, I don't think you would like it. Because it feels like money grab, you know, it's just all power, more money. And it's just not right, because you're living there in your home and you see out of towners coming in just to get and not live there. That's all I got to say. Thanks.
Anyone else that hasn't spoken previously before Mr. Schmucker comes up?
I spoke previously, but I'll be very brief, no offense. Mohako, 17 Farnham Hill. First is my email that was sent. My name is Mohako and I live at 17 Farnham Hill. I am writing to go on record that I oppose the Diamond Ave zone change, which is what we're here for. No offense to the proposal, but it's still the zone change we've been waiting for. Zone change and all that it will lead to. My wife and I have lived here for 30 years, which is half of my life. And we've enjoyed a diverse, quiet and safe neighborhood. The last thing I want is to have our neighborhood killed for this or any other future product. Sincerely, Paul and Judy Hocko. My last statement is to say I did not vote for the TOD. I'm just opposed to things like that. There's places for that, and it's not in this part of Bethel, at least where I live. You want to put in other places of Bethel, good luck, but not where we live, because it's going to stick out like a sore thumb and it doesn't belong there. That's all I'm going to say. I oppose the change. Thank you very much.
Mr. Schmucker.
Thank you very much. I wanted a couple of comments because people know from the last
Name
testimony.
again for the record, please.
John Schmucker, 245 Greenwood Avenue. And I want to thank the commission for all their work. It's a tough decision. You guys have put a lot of time into it. I appreciate what Beth has done with the TOD. I think it's well designed, et cetera. So it's not in opposition to that I speak. I just have a couple of clarifications. Unless I'm mistaken, I'm going to ask these questions. In an industrial zone, I zone, the height of the building is limited to 2.5 stories, except by special permission. So it'd be 2.5.
Special permit.
And what the developer has asked for 4-story buildings. Also under industrial, I think that the limited usage is 50% based upon my reading of planning and zoning versus this at 90% coverage. If I'm correct.
It's a different zone, correct.
So we have a 90%
Fifty
coverage.
percent, I'm not sure. I'd have to check the
Yeah,
regs.
I think it's correct, but you could please check it for me.
Mhm.
What I'm saying is what exists there if a guy goes to develop that industrial land? He doesn't have, he can develop it, the developer is free to develop it, expand on it. But the coverage that would be occurred under industrial is significantly less by height and by density for that entire neighborhood. If you look at the neighbors, you're saying, what's going to go in the neighborhood? You've got 90% coverage plus secondarily 4-story buildings. So you look at the neighborhood around it, there's nothing even approaching that. So how did it affect the neighborhood? Height and density. The second thing, as Ken pointed out earlier, if this goes, the whole back of that street will cascade. It's all going to go in with developers. That whole thing is going to be, it's not just that 2 parcels. It's the whole rest of the street's going to go. And then every other industrial parcel is going to go, and it cascades all through there. It's not just this, think of the next developer coming in to switch it over because you said, we're going to switch it over. And finally, I just want to say one other thing. The numbers from the 2018 master plan showed 4.6% industrial. It's right in the report. If you take this industrial land away, it never can come back. It's gone. The industries create jobs, low impact on the town, and it's better for the town. So if you take it away, it's gone forever. If you take this away, it cascades through all the rest of the industrial land. So I'm just saying it's a serious consideration. I appreciate what everyone has done, the work and so forth. But please consider those factors. Okay? Thank you very much for your time tonight. Appreciate it.
Anyone else in the public going to speak?
Move forward.
Farm McNabb, 14 Diamond Avenue, directly across the street. There's a few of us that are directly across the street from this. I'm way too emotional to speak, but listening to the proposal and everything that's going on since, someone referenced a movie last week. I'm gonna reference one this week or last month. Anybody see The Music Man? We're getting monorail. That's exactly what this is. It's nothing more than a cash grab, and we're getting a monorail. Watch The Music Man again. This is so wrong. This is the wrong place for this.
Anybody else?
I didn't think I was gonna say anything tonight.
You have an address, please, for the record?
Sure, Janice Moy, 10 Diamond Avenue. I have a couple questions and a comment. I guess it's the question to Beth. Can you stop a project or force a change to a plan if the project conforms to the TOD regulations? And as far as this project, the TOD regulations as they are right now, not as they might be in a few weeks?
The answer to the question is yes. It's not my decision, it's the board's
No.
decision.
But it can be, even if.
You're asking me for an opinion,
Well, even if it
basically.
conforms with the regulations.
You're asking me for an opinion. I can only give you an opinion.
Okay, because I noticed with Whitney that a big issue was made. We conformed with all the regulations.
That's a
How can you
different
deny
matter.
us?
I'm sorry, but
And I know
please
they
do not
didn't.
discuss it. We're in a court case with that right
I
now.
know,
I would suggest that you refrain from making any comments.
okay. I have heard that if a project conforms with all the regulations, the board cannot deny it. Is that correct?
I would, do you want me to answer that question to the best of my ability? I am not an attorney, if you know. The board has great discretion with the TOD regulations and with the plan itself.
Okay, so building.
Great
heights-
discretion.
Okay, what that means.
What that means is that the commission, it is a very flexible, creative zone. And the regulations do leave some leeway in order to make changes.
Okay. There are restrictions on what can go into the industrial zone, correct? What uses? I remember the pool chemicals.
Very few.
and
Who's
That's
that?
been banned.
Very few.
Very few. I read them over today myself.
Very
Well, I don't, what
There
pool
was,
company?
there were pool chemicals stored across from what was then Augustana Homes. And they had a fire there one day And everybody went, what are they doing in the center of town across from elderly housing?
I
assume
don't recall.
there are restrictions on that. There are some restrictions on what can go there, right?
Okay, that you're talking about
In the eyes.
you know, in the I zone. If you're using 5 Durant Avenue or the Davenport's property in regards to that, that is warehousing. As far as what is in warehousing, we're not aware 100% of the time what is being housed in the warehouse
Okay.
for fire protection purposes. We'd
That's
like
what-
to know because of that instance, but no, we're not aware.
Okay, for the record, Presto Frame, the first
Yes,
building, is very nice. You know, they built in 1962, I think. So the building is dated. I mean, it doesn't look like the Kellogg's building, but they've kept the property very nice for 60 years. So we have to give credit to them and not.
the
just-
intent of my statement was in regards to what has happened to older properties to present. And the only 2 properties that something has happened of
Right.
substantial improvement is
Right,
Diamond and also Performance Concrete.
yes, I agree.
Okay,
But
I just wanted to clarify
Yeah, no,
your
I'm not
statement.
disagreeing with you. I'm just saying. Some properties didn't need to be upgraded. The last thing is about Ken's comment on creep and Penny's question. And Attorney Marcus's answer. I agree that the change to the single family side of the street will be made by the people who live there. But as Mr. Marcus said, it's if they decide, meaning we decide that we don't want to live in an urban setting, and we will then decide to move. And I'm not sure how that isn't a negative impact. I think that's exactly what will happen. That this development will go in, and then other developments will go in. And the people who live there now will get essentially pushed out because we don't want 3 or 4 story buildings looking over us and the traffic and et cetera, et cetera. I don't think it belongs in the neighborhood. And I don't think that saying it won't have a negative impact on us is correct.
Any other comments from the public?
My name is Frank Firsch. I live at 300 Hollow Drive. I'm really kind of new to the whole thing. Haven't been in town that much, but I am back.
Right.
And
I'm sorry.
in any event, I'm coming at this not from a technical standpoint, but from really an aesthetic standpoint, and really just a conformity with the natural charm of Bethel. I don't view industrialization as a negative. I think responsible industrialization, it's been industrial zone forever. It's fine. If nobody really wants to develop there, well, that's fine. That's our own defense. If they want to develop there, planning department has a lot of discretion on what can go in and what can't. I think industrialization has a whole lot less impact on the community than multifamily housing. Multifamily housing comes with a lot of people, a lot of traffic. And this particular housing is 4 stories high. There's nothing else around it. And I agree that eventually we'll get a whole lot more of that kind of cluster type housing. I was looking at some statistics today before I came, and whether this is true or not, I see that Bethel is ranked 33 out of 169 towns in density. We already have a lot of multifamily housing. And I work in Norwalk. I'm from Norwalk, and I saw what they've done with their transit district down there. And it's a nightmare, and I don't understand it. The transit district is like a justification for just more multifamily housing, more affordable housing, cramming people into these little boxes where they don't touch the ground. They share a wall, they share a ceiling, and a lot of it's transit. Now, I have nothing against living in an apartment building. I mean, people do it all the time and then they move on, but it's not the ideal. And to the extent that it has an impact to the rest of the community. You have 200 families or coming in, you're gonna have 400 cars. I mean, that's crazy. It just doesn't go with it. So I don't buy into, you know, some of the terms and the jargon is thrown around, you know, you have vision and you're progressive and you're ahead of the curve and the status quo is terrible and all that stuff. No, the status quo is just fine with me. You know, I do respect the people that came before me and built this great town. Now you got new developers and new people coming into town and want to take that town away. And I would be, you're not compelled to make a radical change to the zoning in town. And it's kind of a weak excuse to use the transit district to get that through. The trains, I mean, the population is inverted. We have a lot less young people getting married much later in life, having many fewer children. That's just a whole facade to get other, you know, dense housing. We don't have that. We have very young people being and a lot of older people retiring. They're not going to be using the train. People are already, you know, 30-40% of people that used to go to New York City are not even there anymore. So people are working from home. Companies are finding that the productivity of the people working home is good. So we have the technology. There's our transit district right there. The transit district is that we develop the technology that we won't have to ride the train to the city. So I wouldn't be, I think it's a bit of subterfuge to use the transit district as the ruse to get more multifamily housing into the town.
Did you have a question,
Well, no, it's
sir?
not a real question, but I mean, this is a time for public comment. I just want to know, how far does that transit district go? What area does it
The
encompass?
map is on the wall in the hallway.
Okay, so it's more than just Diamond Avenue.
Correct.
Okay, so it gives license to do whatever you're gonna do on Diamond Avenue someplace else.
Yeah.
Right? Is that correct?
Excuse me, sir,
Yeah.
no, that's not correct.
Okay, so it's not correct.
No.
Okay, anyway, just getting back to my final point is that industrialization belongs downtown. That's where it belongs. People need to live and live and pray and shop to get in the same place. That's how you have a vibrant downtown. So I wouldn't condemn all industrialization. I think industrialization is a good thing. And if it's downtown, so much the better. You might have people being able to walk to work. Churches downtown. I fought the movement of the church because people want to pray downtown where you live, not off in the country someplace. So let's not
And
use.
people want to live downtown.
People, they
right?
do, right, but they
A
want
lot
to
of
work
people do.
downtown.
And they want to work downtown.
But good planners also realize that where you work, where you pray, where you shop, and where if you live in the same spot, it's a vibrant community.
That's
It's not
correct.
feedback. Okay, so let's not get rid of the industrialization. We have a great planner in town. There's not going to be irresponsible, hazardous type of industrialization on Diamond Avenue. There's a whole lot less impact. I'd rather see a few trucks coming in at night than hundreds of people populating all downtown. You can't even get down Greenwood Avenue on rush hour, right?
Yes.
What's that gonna
Okay,
be
we're
like?
getting off topic.
Well, the traffic is an impact, right?
Topic,
Correct.
traffic is with the site plan, right?
Right.
And you're talking more globally than focusing on,
But if you get the transit district through and you get the multifamily housing through, then you have to deal with the traffic. I mean, these are not isolated things. This is evolutionary. And the downtown Bethel is not gonna be charming anymore. It's gonna be a city. I saw what happened in Norwalk. Norwalk is bizarre. You know, and so anyway, that's my comment.
Excuse
Thank
me,
you very
Ray,
Thank you. very much.
can you tell me your address again?
3 Honey Hollow Drive.
Funny how, thank you.
we done?
So at this time, I'm going to close the public hearing.
Ken, I would, Mr. Chairman, I would recommend that you also open the floor for public comment for those that are on Zoom.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's right. Are there any additional comments from those participating via Zoom? I see Diane has her hand up. Yeah.
Hi, Diane Ryan, 13 Karen Drive. I had written an email this evening, so it didn't get into your I guess it didn't get to Beth, or I don't know, they didn't check it or something, but anyway, do you want me to read my letter to you, or do you want to have them put it in the record? I can do both.
Put it in the record.
I'm sorry, Bob, go ahead.
We said put it in record.
I would suggest that we put it in the record. We all have an opportunity to review it in a leisure.
Diane, I didn't get it, so why don't you read it?
Okay.
Okay, I wrote, I sent it to you this
My
evening,
email now.
this evening. So before, a couple of hours before the meeting.
No,
I'm writing you want me to read? Okay. I'm writing regarding the zone change proposal for 9 and 11 Diamond Avenue during the continued public hearing, January 10, 2023. I was unable to attend prior public hearing dates, being out of town and without them over Zoom. I think making a change to the zoning of the 9 and 11 Diamond Avenue property from industrial to commercial residential TOD overlay is short-sighted and would only benefit the owner, developer, and not the neighbors or town. It removes the town's prime industrial property that will be needed as industry moves back to our country, which seems to be the goal, I think, at this point in our country. The proposal would also create another town within our town, which is opposed to what I've read the goal being in the master plan. It would compete and take away from the downtown area. It would strain our town's infrastructure. It would adversely affect not only the nearby neighbors, but all Bethel citizens throughout the town with increased traffic. Please do not vote to change the zoning on this 9 and 11 Diamond Avenue property from industrial to commercial residential TOD overlay. In addition, I ask you to put a moratorium on building within the TOD until the TOD and plan of development can be reviewed and updated to meet the present needs and goals of our town and all its citizens. Please also renew, including all your meetings over Zoom, to allow the public's participation, especially since the illnesses of COVID, RSV, and flu are still rampant. It's considerate of the health and welfare of not only the citizens, but you, the commission members, as well. Excuses of technology issues over Zoom and the sound of AC units creating noise during a meeting and then turned off during the heat of summer in response is unacceptable. These issues should be able to be worked out along with situating the room so that everyone over Zoom as well as in person can see what's being presented and who is speaking, which we cannot see unless you have the people move forward or you say who you are at the table. A lot of you are cut off, including Beth and the applicant. I had suggested after a meeting in the fall that it would be helpful to have your names in front of you on the table as well. So people on the commission and those presenting can clearly state who is speaking, since often that's unintelligible over Zoom, especially without the use of microphones. At this point, I understand Beth's voice, but I don't know anybody else's voice sitting at the table. So we're guessing basically who's speaking when we're over Zoom. Thank you for consideration in these matters. Sincerely, Diane Ryan.
Can I just make one comment today? Diane, all your concerns that you're discussing about regarding the room and equipment and microphones and things of that nature, all of that should be addressed through the selectman's office. What we do as a commission, we do the best that we can with what we're given as far as tools. And I don't do IT. I don't do this type of communication. The best that we do as far as a commission is try to record. And let me just explain one other thing to everybody here this evening, because I'm taking it as an opportunity to further educate. The Planning and Zoning Commission and most of your land use commissions for the last 40 years, and Julie Sorchek is one of the former chairmen of land use, can attest to this, that we have recorded our meetings one way or another. We are the only board that have been doing that for 40 to 30 years, whether versus audio, video or whatever. So if somebody needed to hear what happened at a meeting, Board of Ed, did you record all the time too? Okay, so excuse me, well, I'll include you. But anyways, we've been doing it for years. You guys got the good stuff upstairs. Again, there's a little plug. But it's important to know that all of that type of equipment and the issues that we've had, it's over the last 2 years with video recording and things of that nature, you need to address it with the front office and the Board of Finance. We have nothing I couldn't even begin to say what we would use in order to make this room more compatible for usage for the general public. But I will just tell you that we continue to try and we do the best we can with the tools that we're given. All right, Diane, thank you. So call the front office. I encourage all of you.
Thank you, Beth. And before I do close, Mr. Marcus, do you have any closing comments?
Just briefly, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, for the record, Neil Marcus.
Mr. Marcus, hold on. Is there anybody else on Zoom? I don't see any hands raised.
I'm not seeing any other hands raised or anyone else that would otherwise suggest that they want to offer public comment this time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, David. Mr. Marcus.
If I can, Mr. Chairman, again, for the record, Neil Marcus, Honorable PC, on behalf of the applicant. And the first thing I have to put to bed is the new downtown. That phrase was incorporated by the applicant in one of his presentations on a preliminary plan. That phrase comes out of your records. That phrase was used by DPZ in discussing the plan of conservation development. He didn't make it up. Adriano's sitting here. He'd like to take credit maybe for where he does make, comes up with brilliant ideas. That was a phrase used by your consultants. So we thought improperly that was a phrase that was accepted by you in developing the plan of conservation development. In no way did we intend to create a new downtown. But if the plan of conservation development sees this as helping to create the new downtown, and that's not the replacement of the old downtown, it's just part of the whole area. As I read DPZ, they said, you would now incorporate this neighborhood as part of downtown Bethel in a way that creates a new downtown. So this has been given, it's been drawn out of proportion and taken, and it's been taken out of context, I guess. So the new downtown is merely a suggestion that a TOD would incorporate a neighborhood into the downtown in a new manner. It would be progress. So that's one. In terms of some of the comments, Ms. McCollum says that we should not allow development on this site to negatively affect or take away the efforts to rejuvenate, improve existing Greenwood Avenue in the neighborhood. And I agree 100%. We shouldn't. And that's when we get to the site plan, you're going to see that your uses that you will approve on this site are compatible and they're not destructive. That's not the purpose. So I agree with her 100%. The comment by Julia Sorsek, I'm not sure I understand what the election has to do with this application. This commission is not being reelected. I think it's just for the first selectman. And quite honestly, your business goes on whether that special election takes place or not. So I don't understand why you'd hold up, see the results of the election, but I'll leave that up to you. A couple of the other the comments are just, not in my neighborhood, money grab. Quite honestly, any development of this nature is done usually for the idea that you can make a reasonable profit. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. I can show you a lot of projects that have disastrously lost money, but people have miscalculated the market and other miscalculations. So that's not what this decision decides. They don't decide whether my client is making a good gamble, a bad gamble. The question is this a proper development under the TOD zone? Ultimately, if the TOD zone is properly applied to the industrial neighborhood. So a lot of these questions about the, and some people say, well, we're going to create an area where out of towners will live. I think there was Mr. Ritter who used that, out of towners. Well, at one point, most of the people in the room were probably out of towners. Some of them go back 50 or 60 years, which is perfect. That's rare in this day and age where people stay committed to one area for long periods of time. It's great, but the fact is it's not a consideration for this commission as to whether the people who come and live in Bethel, who come from Norwalk, or come from North Carolina, it makes no difference. On a couple of the other comments. And John Schmucker, again, I agree with what he has said, that when you ultimately look at the site plan, which someday we hope to get to, you have to consider and weigh the height of buildings. Now, quite honestly, for years, every zoning regulation in this area has talked about height of buildings, and they've talked about coverage, lot coverage, percentages, etc. The new concept, modern zoning, talks about bulk. And honestly, a lot of zoners will say that the old idea of sprawling a building on a site is ridiculous, to take up a large site plan for a 2-story building when you can shrink it, make it 4 stories and have open spaces, park areas. That's something that you'll consider when you look at the site plan. And quite honestly, if you tell the applicant, figure out a place to take a story off of that, that's a 3-story and not a 4-story, that goes back to, well, where can you put it on the site? Or can you eliminate it completely? I can't disagree with John on that issue, that's definitely a comparison. And the question of whether the I zone keeps this to a 50% coverage versus a 90% in the TOD, the concept plan talks about less than 50% real coverage of buildings. I guess the question is whether you're going to talk about impervious areas or buildings. So again, it's a site plan issue, but it is properly raised that when you look at the site plan, you should say, if we had left this industrial, how would the bulk of these buildings and the coverage have impacted this neighborhood? And you can apply that thinking. There's no reason you can't, but it's no reason to say, well, as a result of that, it should always be industrial, because that's not a proper conclusion. So I'll agree with John's analysis. I won't agree with that conclusions. In the question of whether all I zones will disappear, to a certain degree, I think you want the I zone as it's currently allowed in downtown Bethel to disappear someday. If now, not completely, but you'd like it to change, because I don't think, as Beth has said, I'm not sure that downtown Bethel should take great pride in parking school buses for the town of Easton. Even though, quite honestly, they're on my client's property, so I'm happy they're there. But looking at realistically from the zoning point of view, there are a lot of the industrial uses that currently exist, as Beth has cited in her analysis of Durant and Diamond with the adjoining neighborhood. You don't really want those uses. You'd like them to change over time. Now, there are other industrial uses, if they exist in Connecticut, which I'd call more high-tech uses. And that's not so much industrial, that's more office park type uses. Those are great. They do create great jobs. I'm not sure school bus lots create terrific jobs for people in Bethel, because I don't know how many of those bus drivers actually live in downtown Bethel. Maybe a couple of them do, but I don't think that's the type of jobs that you're looking at creating. So all these comments taken in a vacuum make some sense, and I don't dispute that. But if you look at the big picture, they kind of get lost. And this is an issue where a commission looks at a larger picture. Again, Janice Moy asked, if a project complies with zoning regs, does it have to be approved? And the answer is yes and no. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. It depends on how the regulations are written and how the project is presented. So there's no cut and dry on that answer. The other question about encouraging industrial zones, again, was Mr. Frank. I didn't catch the spelling of his last name. I did find he lives on 3 Honey Hollow Drive. And he made a speech in favor of industrial in opposed to multifamily housing. I'd asked him to read the article on page 2 of the Danbury paper yesterday that we talked about earlier in the meeting. You got the state of Connecticut now talking about legislation to create, and what did they say in that article? Apartments. They're not looking for single family housing. The state is looking to create apartments. And why? It's and somebody else, again, it was the same speaker who said there are a lot less young people around. Read the article. The state wants to encourage housing for young people because Connecticut has undergone sort of a brain drain. In reality, they don't want me anymore. They want my young associates to come and work here. They want youth, and youth needs housing, and housing usually requires more efficient land use than the old single family half acre, 1 acre, 2 acre zones. So the other issue that he raised, which is kind of, I don't want to get too much into social commentaries, but the issue of the home office and working remotely. That issue is still, the jury is way out on that. The companies are concerned that you lose so much by not having people work together. And actually, Ms. Ryan up there said the same thing. You'll lose so much by having people out on Zoom when they can't look you guys in the face here in this room. I agree with her. I'd like everybody here, and I wouldn't mind if you put the names there. But I'm happy to just look at your faces. But the answer is that I'm not sure people are going to continue to work from home. But if they work in offices, the modern approach is to have mass transit. And that is something that this country has to deal with. And just as an aside, I was with my oldest son over New Year's, and he said, "Dad, you'd be proud of me. I rode 2,000 miles on my bicycle to work that I didn't drive in my car." He lives in San Francisco. And I said, I wish that I could do that here. I unfortunately, we don't have the bicycle paths, the roads, we don't have the climate that allows me to really do that. There are some days, believe it or not, that I'll ride my bike from Reading through Bethel to Danbury to work, taking my life in my hands on the roads. But that's the wave of the future. It really is. Again, on the comment of keeping this making a moratorium on these decisions until the POCD and the TOD are reviewed. I don't know what the plan is on that. I thought we just passed and adopted the plan of conservation development. I didn't realize we were going to go back and review it. But in reality, you'll drive me nuts if you do. But I'm hoping that you'll drive Beth nuts too, and yourselves. You can't, you make a decision. And by the way, one of the other speakers, and I'll wrap this up, one of the other speakers earlier on this evening, I'll try to identify who that was. It was Colleen McCollum, who said the stakeholder interviews do not favor this TOD application, do not favor the TOD district. Well, yeah, there are some people who don't like it. That's why you interview stakeholders. And if you interview 100 stakeholders and 20 of them come out with negative comments and 80 of them come out with very positive comments, you make your decision based on what you think is in the best interest of the general population. So granted, there are people here tonight who are opposed to this project. And granted, there are people that are just opposed to the TOD generally. The project will be defined as the plans come before you. The TOD district, really, quite honestly, is a concept that I thought has already been decided. But if it hasn't been decided, essentially, the people that are here this evening are asking you to have a referendum on it in this application. I'd prefer you don't. But the fact of the matter is, in reality, Alexis de Tocqueville, the great French writer, writing Democracy in America back in the early 19th century. You talk about history, you're talking to the wrong guy. The 19th century, de Tocqueville wrote about the tyranny of the minority. And the tyranny of the minority is the essence of democracy in de Tocqueville's view of the great American experiment, which, by the way, may or may not survive in recent times. But the fact of the matter is that you always worry about the tyranny of the minority. When I was in law school, I had a professor who explained the same thing. He said, just look at a New York transit strike and they'll know what the tyranny of minority is. But, we were living in New York, we we're going to law school in New York. But the fact of the matter is, I respect the minority view.
Who says we're the minority?
However,
We have hundreds of
Yeah,
signatures.
who says
and
we're
the
the
thousands
minority?
of people
You
who
could
live
be the
in town.
minority.
Let Mr. Marcus
I'm
finish,
not
please.
here to debate. I'm just
Apparently
saying,
you are.
I'm just saying that
One-sided.
I respect the views of the minority, but I
We're not the
also.
minority.
Mr. Infursia, we listen when you.
Okay.
It's time to.
I'm through, thank you, sir.
Point of order.
If you let me sit down, I will. Thank you.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. This is the public hearing, correct?
That's right.
Was the presentation already made by the applicant? I mean, this has gone back and forth many times. The public gets a chance to make some comments. Then the applicant can shoot down every one of those comments without rebuttal, because this is an advocacy type of a meeting. It's an advocacy for the applicant. It's not a public hearing for the people who are considered to be the minority. He wants to foist his views of, industrialization is bad and multifamily housing is great. And how could you not go along with that heresy of that precedent? But there is a heresy in that precedent. You just don't keep going down the same road, making the same mistake. Bethel's a beautiful town, and there was a reason for it. There was restraint. Now that we don't want to talk about restraint, we don't want to talk about neighborhood responsibility. All we want to talk about is more housing and more traffic. And, we have centers, we have urban centers in this country. They're called cities. That's what the cities are for. And many people love that urban type life. Bethel was not bad. Bethel was always a bedroom town. And it maintained, there's hardly any towns in Connecticut. My wife and I are taking a journey through all the towns in Connecticut. There are hardly any towns in Connecticut that have the downtown charm of Bethel. And you're going to ruin it by
I don't think so.
actually allowing
Statement
this
to the
kind of,
commission at this time.
I'm sorry.
I don't think that's an appropriate commission to this statement. We are taking in input from the applicant. We're taking in now our third night, probably a total of 8 to 10 hours of testimony from the public. We haven't made a decision.
Okay.
So I appreciate your comments, but let's please keep them neutral.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you very much. At this point, I am closing the public hearing on 9 and 11 Diamond Avenue, and we will take it under consideration. Thank you all for your input and your time. Appreciate everybody coming out.
Does that mean we have to go?
You can stay until the cows come home. but We have more business to conduct.
Behave yourself.
What more will we discuss tonight?
Oh, you're not making a decision right now.
No, ma'am.
No, oh, no. We have a lot of homework to do. All right. I think.
Well, it's nice to have a little better.
I'm sorry.
It's not back and forth. That's the impression I'm getting.
Well, back and forth is not. In fact, it's the exact opposite.
Well, that's not what just happened.
Yeah, we can listen to every page. That's the important part.
Next item on the agenda.
Yeah.
Hearing is closed. Moving on.
Thank you, Rich.
Farnham.
Point of order, Frank.
Agenda
Is the
is a
applicant
public
here?
hearing for
8 Trowbridge.
Barnett Machinery Corporation, 8 Trowbridge Drive. Any takers? David,
The applicant here?
I'm sorry, Beth.
is the applicant here, David?
I do not see anyone on Zoom that appears to be speaking for the applicant at this time now.
Okay,
Should we postpone the public hearing?
It over there.
no,
Can I have the public hearing notice?
Open the public hearing and keep it open.
no, we're not gonna do that. If you guys are, I don't think that, I think the applicant wasn't informed properly. We have all the information necessary in order to review the application. David, you met with the applicant, is that correct?
I'm sorry, for 8 Trowbridge Drive?
Yes,
Trowbridge Drive.
you met with the applicant, am I correct? 8 Trowbridge Drive is a special permit for outside storage.
Oh, yes, that's correct. I'm sorry. You had to jog my memory for this one, Beth. My apologies.
I'm just gonna read this one.
That is correct. I did meet with the applicant. This hearing, the impetus for this hearing is on site inspection that I conducted of the property for the tenant that occupies the building at this address. Upon going to the rear of this building, I had observed materials that were accessory to the tenant business that was on the property that were being stored outside. I advised Beth on how this should be handled. And I referred to the section of the zoning regulations, which I believe if Beth hasn't made a report of what that is for you, I can give that to you from what that is from the reg. Okay,
Yes.
yeah, very good.
Let me officially open the public hearing
Okay,
for Cornet Machinery Corporation, 8 Tobridge Drive. Please note for the record, the applicant is not present at tonight's meeting.
to appear January 2nd and January 6th, 2023 in the News Times, public notice. The Bethel Planning and Zoning Commission held a public hearing for the special permit for Coronet Machinery located at 8 Trowbridge Drive for the storage of outside containers. The hearing will be held on January 10th, 2023 at 7 p.m. in the conference room D of the Municipal Center, 1 School Street, Bethel, Connecticut. Parking is located at the rear of the building. The public may send comments via regular mail and email to landuse@bethelct.gov. Ken Stevens, Chairman.
Thank you.
Now, we also have a memorandum from Beth Cavagna staff report. 8 Trowbridge Drive special permit outside storage of material. The request is for a special permit under section 4-3-M-2 outside storage of material as an accessory use to a principal use. Quote, see attached regulation, quote, quote. Pictures and a survey showing the location of the proposed use are also attached. Turning movements were reviewed by the Fire Marshal, Tom Gallagher, who verified that there is no
Impediment.
thank you very much, impediment to the emergency vehicles accessing the property. And attached is the regulation for the storage use, a picture of the containers that are going to be put on the property.
There's also a survey within the file showing the location of the containers to the rear of the property. And David, it's my understanding that the containers, they do some kind of manufacturing for defense. And they need to use those racks and containers for storage of certain material.
That's correct. So those racks get changed out, and the ones that cannot be stored in the building are stored in the on-site storage container that's outside. That's correct.
Do you have any questions regarding this?
I have a question for you.
Yes,
A point of order.
yes.
With the applicant not present, it would be appropriate to continue the hearing until the next meeting when they may appear to answer questions the public may have.
I would ask the public if they have any questions pertaining to the application.
Any questions from the public?
No. Does the commission, I would ask the commission if the commission has any questions pertaining to the application.
With the drawing of the site plan, does it isn't showing where the container is going to go.
Can we clarify just where
Where they're going to be?
Yes, I thought, I made copies of the,
Oh, it's not in here.
here's it is, right here.
Oh, no, I mean, I'm sorry. I meant
Was
to
looking at
read
the online, so.
Here we go.
Oh, so,
that. Well, I didn't.
To the rear of the building, that's why I referred it to the fire marshal, just to make sure that there was clearance for the aerial truck and other emergency vehicles.
Can I ask a question?
Sure, Patty?
Hi, guys. I have a question. Well, on the face of the application, it would seem to be benign. It's a request. It's, okay. The fact that the applicant has not seen fit to come to this forum, should that impact our decision in any way?
No.
Unless we know that the applicant has an issue, has a problem, has whatever, I'm a little concerned about this.
Can we just table it? Fill it out?
I'll piggyback on that with something, thanks Penny, something a little more substantive, like this is a Department of Defense contract related. So I think to the degree that we're able to learn a little more, so this is the world I live in, right? I do security. So I'm curious about the overall site security, what's being stored, how it's being secured, things like that. Like, I think they do need to be present for this. Like, I don't think it's anything clandestine, but we should have the opportunity before we close anything to say, hey guys, what sort of like risk assessment have you done here as far as the materials go, right? Because they do deal with a lot of Department of Defense contracts, aeronautics, stuff like that. So that's all.
I agree.
It's your call.
I agree.
Rich, I would take this one step further and suggest that there's a certain, okay, I'll put it this way. I'm annoyed that the applicant isn't here. And I find it disrespectful to this group and to any people that might have come. Do we know that neighbors were contacted? We have no information on that. Do we know that anything was done as was supposed to be done? We don't have any information about that. I find it very disrespectful.
Okay, Penny, to go, just to go a little bit further and explain a little bit more. Number one, there may be a miscommunication between the applicant and the office itself. So therefore, it could be partially our responsibility that the applicant isn't here this evening.
Okay,
And
fair
I
enough.
need to
Fair enough.
check into that and discuss that with my staff, and see if there was a miscommunication.
Okay, fair enough.
Secondly, it's my understanding that we are dealing with a property owner who runs a machine shop. It's not someone that is explicitly understands land use affairs and how the process works. There could have been a miscommunication between us and him as to how the process works. So I would hope that you would take back your disrespectful comment until you know whether or not a mistake has been made by our department.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
All right, so we're going to continue this to our meeting, the 24th. I believe that's our next scheduled meeting.
yes.
We'll ask the applicant to appear.
Yeah.
Thanks. Business meeting minutes. We had a couple minor corrections to the minutes, Nancy.
We said that Rich Tibbetts was here and that Rich Tibbetts wasn't here.
Yes, right.
I was there in
I was
person.
there.
I couldn't decide, Rich. So, you know.
Jeez, I was even
Different than here.
I wore a collared shirt, the whole nine, pants.
He's on the tape.
Under invoices, there's a typo in the very motion.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
Do I have a motion to approve with
So
stated
moved.
edits? Second,
Okay.
all in favor?
Aye.
Yes,
Actually, I don't know if I'm even seeing it.
thank you very much.
I'll vote anyway.
Me too.
Okay. We do have invoices. They arrived yesterday, not in time to get on here. What are you looking at now?
I'm sorry.
You're spacing out? Okay.
Yes.
Invoices for legal noticing, $1,016.46.
To the News Times,
Yeah.
make a motion to pay $1,016.46
Second.
to the News Times.
All in favor?
Aye.
Against? Don't move. Beth, you have a planner's report for us?
My planner's report is in front of you. There's a Connecticut Land Use Law Permanent Agency seminar.
Yeah.
That is gonna be paid for by the town. It's on Saturday, March 11th, 2023. And it's an all-day event, but you pick and choose what sections of the seminar you want to listen to. It's done over,
It's fully Zoom. There's no in person.
there's
You
no in
can't go
person.
I'd rather drive and sit in a room than sit on Zoom for
Totally.
6 hours.
I was hoping we could do
Fine.
both.
What the way, if you look at this, the way it's set up,
Right.
there are things that pertain to you as a commission,
Yeah.
Wetlands Commission, and the Zoning Board of Appeals. Last year, the state legislature, or it could have been the year before, made it mandatory for you all to attend an educational class. Now, they haven't decided what the repercussions are if you don't meet that statutory requirement. But it's always good to be prepared because they always try to tie everything to something else that they're proposing. So in this instance, I would request that you fill this out now. Just give me your email address. The book that accompanies this class is invaluable. It is a very, very good reference source.
Peter Olson's teaching one of them.
Peter Olson is teaching one of them. Peter will be up.
As
This
is
Land use.
What is it, David?
as is Attorney Andrus.
Oh, Chuck is also, our ladies council is also teaching one too.
Oh, good.
Okay, they're very, very informative. It's a great, great resource. I encourage you all to just give me that. You know, and follow the instructions as they email them to you. You will all receive that large, it's a great, great book,
This is
different aspects.
right here, with all my sticky notes in it. It's
Could be a line on your resume.
pages of material in here. That's extremely useful.
It is, it's worth it, and it's inexpensive, so. Okay, so anyways, I appreciate you all doing that for me, and anyone who isn't here this evening, I'm gonna ask them to do that also.
You want to put our shipping address in? as you said
Yeah,
that?
shipping address too.
Last time I filled out a printed form like this, I think I got 25 records and tape from yeah, they clip out and you write it.
Yeah, from the CD.
This is like
Oh,
From the record.
Yeah.
Columbia Records.
Columbia Records.
I don't know.
Oh, yeah, remember that. Thanks, Brad.
Well, you're right.
Okay, any other, next item?
Excuse me, Beth, I have a question. For those of us, like myself, who cannot
Yes.
attend the whole thing, do
Right.
we qualify if we attend part?
Can I-
Yes,
Okay,
yes, you will see that it's an all-day seminar, and there's certain aspects that you do want to listen to. You don't have to attend in person, you want to listen to what is going on.
no,
If
I,
that's-
right. No, I understand. I'm just saying that, for example, I am involved in my synagogue's worship services until
Right.
about 1 o'clock, so I can't listen in.
Right, okay. So you can listen in afterwards.
Right, this meeting is going to be recorded, and for those of you who are unable to sit the whole thing through in one shot, it's 9 to 4, you're essentially committing to a whole day. If you're gonna try to listen to this in one go, but if you can't, it's going to be recorded, and for those who sign up, like the people that are in meeting room D are doing right now, you will have a recording that gets sent to you so that you can listen to pieces of it, especially the ones that are most pertinent to you at any time.
Understood, okay.
That's all I have for you this evening.
Thank you, Beth. Any further comments from the commission? Any further input from the public? Make a motion to close the meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved.